Welcome to the German Council on Foreign Relations, DGAP, and welcome to today's morning briefing. My name is Stöckmann, and I'm head of the Kaiser Forum, a new initiative at DGAP for strategic questions to be launched later this year. In today's briefing, we are looking at the tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump yesterday on the 2nd of April, a day that he has called Liberation Day. The new measures include a set of reciprocal tariffs on American trading partners ranging from 10 to 49%. The EU faces 20%, China 34%, the UK a baseline 10%. Two of the closest trading partners, Mexico and Canada, were not mentioned, though they had already been the target over the past weeks. President Trump's rationale is they do it to us, we do it to them. But how exactly the new tariffs were calculated, we'll perhaps learn in this briefing. Now, in addition to the reciprocal tariffs, Trump also announced a 25% fee on all car imports that will go into effect. Prior to Liberation Day, so-called Liberation Day, Trump had already announced an additional 20% tariff on all Chinese imports and a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium imports. There's also a 10% tariff on energy imports from Canada. Germany, as the third largest exporter in the world and one of the most trade-oriented economies, will particularly be affected. Trump's idea is to raise money and to encourage domestic manufacturing, or in his own words, tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's worth noting that he has also referred to tariff as one of the most beautiful words in the dictionary. Now, where are these new tariffs taking us? Is this part of some coherent plan? What does it mean for German businesses in particular, and how can Germany and Europe respond? To discuss these and other questions, I'm delighted to introduce our speakers today. Dr. Claudia Schmucker is head of the Center for Geoeconomics, Geopolitics and Technology here at DGAP. She works on European and transatlantic trade policy, the WTO, and the role of international and global forums such as G7 and G20. She has recently published in the International Politik Quarterly magazine on Trump's tariffs and how they endanger world trade, and I encourage you to check this publication out. After Claudia Schmucker, we will hear from Christoph Seemann, who is head of the Department of Geoeconomics and Trade at the German Federal Foreign Office, a department that also covers international economics, trade, and finance. And I can mention that Mr. Seemann has been a previous contributor to the DGAP's morning briefing series. I believe last year in February, we talked about the WTO Ministerial Conference. So welcome back, Mr. Seemann. Last but not least, Dr. Nicholas Kessels, who is replacing Matthias Krämer on short notice. So thanks for joining, is Deputy Head of External Economic Policy at the Federation of German Industries, BDI. He works on trade, export controls, sanctions, and extraterritoriality. He holds a PhD from Freie Universität on the influence of the Financial Stability Board on transatlantic regulatory cooperation between the US and the EU, and is therefore excellently qualified to join us today. Welcome, Dr. Kessels. Now, before we begin, just a few housekeeping announcements. We'd like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded and will be uploaded subsequently. We'll kick off our conversation here on the panel with about 5 minutes of intro remarks, and then open up for questions after about 30 minutes. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, then raise your hand, virtually or otherwise, and then when invited to speak, briefly introduce yourself and keep your intervention relatively short so we can pick up as many as possible. Finally, a word of thanks to my colleagues supporting this series, Henning Hoff, Milan Nitsch, Patrick Teichmann, Lili Hong, Wiebke Evering, Helga Beck, and many others. Now, without much further ado, over to you, Claudia. Can you help us make sense of what happened yesterday and give us some sort of overview of Trump's trade policy, both the policy announced and the one enacted since taking office, and especially what happened yesterday? Over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much. So today is Liberation Day +1, which we should probably call Disruption Day, actually, when we look at it from a European perspective. You mentioned that Christoph Seemann already joined us on a morning briefing on the WTO Ministerial Conference, and this really sounds like the good old days when we talked about WTO rules and the global trading system. So back to transatlantic trade or US trade policy under Trump. Since Trump's return to the White House on January 20, trade policy has really become the center of attention. Trump's America First trade policy uses the large US market as a lever to achieve various geoeconomic, geopolitical, and security goals that are only in the interest of the United States. As you mentioned before, tariffs are the most beautiful word in the dictionary. They are his weapon of choice. And his Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, says they are imposed for various reasons. They're imposed to combat unfair trade measures. They're imposed to push for new negotiations, but they are also simply used as a source of revenues to offset potential losses for future tax breaks. And I would like to add a fourth component why he uses tariffs, and that's simply to protect U.S. manufacturing interests. Tariffs are introduced contrary to the rules of the World Trade Organization. Instead, they are based on U.S. national trade laws, which were enacted during the Cold War, and some of them have never been used before. So what we see here, what is used is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act from 1977. That's also the basis for Liberation Day. What we also see is Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. All these trade laws are focused on national emergencies and national security, and as such, they're able to impose quick and uncomplicated tariffs on the grounds of national security against all trading partners. And this includes FTA partners such as Canada or Mexico, or the European Union, which saw itself as a partner or ally before. So what has happened so far? I want to highlight three areas. The first is trade policy and tariffs are used for economic goals. And this is our Liberation Day. These are the reciprocal tariffs that were announced yesterday. There's a complicated way on how they were calculated. It's not really conclusive the way they did it. So he imposed a baseline tariff of 10%. You mentioned that already, Jan, and a higher reciprocal tariff for the EU, which is really 20%. And this is astounding because we do not really have a current account deficit with the United States. If we add services, it's almost balanced. If you look at tariffs, we are almost equal. So the 20% is really highly debatable. He again used national trade laws as the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose these tariffs. He left a small room for negotiations until April 9th, and the EU probably hopes to negotiate a solution on that. In addition to these reciprocal tariffs, and this is what you mentioned also, are sector-specific tariffs to help protect U.S. manufacturing base. And these tariffs, as far as we understand, are not open to negotiations, and these are called the big five sectors. The first one is steel. Trump announced tariffs on 25% on steel and aluminum without any exceptions, also against European Union, including Germany. The second one is cars and car parts. He announced them on March 26, and they are supposed to enter into force today, if I remember correctly. 25% tariffs also directed to the EU, including Germany. What will come up? We have three more sectors that are of interest. The third one is pharmaceutical tariffs. We expect them to be introduced at the end of April. Then we will have lumber and semiconductors. And contrary to the reciprocal tariffs, we do not expect him to be open for negotiations on these tariffs. The second area where trade policy is used is to address political and security issues. And here, Canada and Mexico have been the first countries to be hit this way. On February 1st, 2025, he announced tariff of 25% because both countries were allegedly taking too little action to curb illegal migration and fentanyl trade. And here you can see that trade agreements, because we keep on talking about a possible TTIP, trade agreements such as USMCA do not help prevent any kind of tariffs, even if you're in this kind of negotiations. Again, laws from the Cold War era are used. And when you look at Canada, these tariffs really lack any basis. They were just introduced against one of the closest trading partners of the United States. And potentially there could also tariffs come up against the EU. Trade as a third area is also used to address economic security concerns. This will come up in the future regarding stronger export controls, inward and outward investment screening. So to sum up, Donald Trump's re-election as US president marks a watershed in global trade policy. Since his return to the White House, he has ignored or actively undermined the principles and rules of the global trading system. He wants to reorganize the world trade order according to American interests, ignoring basic trade principles such as most favored nation or non-discrimination. And this will lead to huge disruptions for transatlantic trade and also for Germany.
Thanks,
Thank
Claudia.
you.
If you allow just a brief follow-up question before we move on to Mr. Seemann. If you look at average external tariff rates in the US, they are at 3% in 2023, the latest numbers, somewhat lower than the EU's at 5% and China's at 7.5%. And you could name more figures, but my question is, does he have a point? He seems to get across a point to his own audience, but is there some point, or is it just completely made up, Claudia?
Well, he does not have a point, because if he wants, I mean, you have to look at his goals. If the goals is to have manufacturing back in the US, I mean, you need trade, you need intermediate goods. So if he raises tariffs, this is nothing where we can help restructure the manufacturing industry. When you look at unfair trade barriers, it's no longer about tariffs. I mean, tariffs between EU and US, I mean, you mentioned there's a slight difference, but they are almost equal. You also look at non-tariff barriers. The EU has a very open common market. You look at other areas. So you cannot say that the EU is more protecting its own market than the US. He looks at specific sectors such as cars and say, okay, we have higher tariffs, 10%, US has 2.5%. The EU would have been willing to negotiate on this area, but nothing happened. He just imposes these kind of tariffs. If he looks at the trade deficit and wants to reduce the trade deficit only on goods, because he does not look on services, tariffs are not the way to do it. Here are macroeconomic issues such as savings rate, which would be able to reduce the deficit. So for all the goals that he mentions, tariffs are not the way forward.
Thanks. Let's turn to the European response. Commission President von der Leyen has made a first statement this morning, and I'm sure the next days are going to be very busy for you, Mr. Seemann. Over to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me again. Yes, I mean, I think Claudia has laid out the landscape perfectly of what we have seen and what we have been seeing yesterday and what will be up in the coming weeks and months. Because, I mean, maybe that's already the first statement. I don't see a quick solution here. This will be dragging on for months and maybe even longer. So on our side, maybe the first important virtue is to have patience and a long breath in this. Secondly, concerning yesterday's announcements, and indeed the car tariffs on 25% have started today. There are no winners. I only see losers in this. Commission President von der Leyen stated this morning clearly the global effects of this. This is a major blow for the global trading system. The foreign minister called it measures like a wrecking ball when you want to renovate the house, because of course you could talk about necessary reforms in the international trading system. There are concerns, and President Trump and his administration have always underlined the concerns they have with Chinese trade industrial policy. I would say the European Union shares some or a large part of these concerns. So there are things which we have to address as partners. But these actions here, I mean, they hit everyone. We see how developing and emerging countries are hit by very high tariffs. So overall, we expect a huge hit for economic prosperity, for employment. We believe that there will be an increase and spiral of protectionist measures and geoeconomic fragmentation. So overall, we're very concerned with yesterday's announcements. What does that mean for us? In a way, we have been preparing for this as far as you can prepare for this. We have coordinated within the EU, within the government, on how to address these measures. The next coming days will be very busy indeed. Today, NATO foreign ministers are meeting, and I'm certain that at the sidelines, also a part, of course, not only the debates about Ukraine, but also trade policy will be a topic. And on Monday, the trade ministers of the EU will come together in Brussels and discuss further steps. President von der Leyen has always underlined that we are prepared. We have initiated countermeasures and packages. The first batch of those will come into effect next week. But with yesterday's announcements, there has to be more, and there has to be a discussion about more. And she has underlined this holds true also for the German government. We support how the Commission is approaching this issue. And that includes in particular also the ongoing efforts of the Commission to reach a deal with the United States. The question really is, how does a deal look like? And because Claudia has pointed out that some issues seem to be non-negotiable, I would probably, from the experience of the first Trump administration, say that, well, a lot of things are negotiable, even if they don't seem to be negotiable. So we will have to see if we can address the sectoral tariffs, what is really the concern on the so-called reciprocal tariffs, because Claudia has also pointed out that they're far from reciprocal. I don't see any signs in how they have been calculated. So we will continue to support the Commission, and on our side also continue to reach out to the United States to reach an agreement. Would that be a larger trade agreement? That I don't see at the moment. Is this a smaller sectoral agreement? An understanding of some most hit sectors? Yes, that is imaginable. So we will continue these efforts, and I think the next coming days will show how the European Union want to move forward as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Seemann. If you allow also a quick follow-up before we move on, perhaps you could share with us the theories about how these reciprocal tariffs were calculated, and given the unconclusive nature of the calculation of these tariffs, perhaps also a word about how to negotiate and how to make a deal on this basis, if the calculation of these tariffs is somewhat shady.
Well, I mean, just on, I mean, we have all seen yesterday's table where there was this calculated reciprocal tariff the US believes have the right to install. There, I would say it is just arbitrary and derived from the trade deficit, but only on the goods side. So lots of issues we already have with that. What does that mean for negotiations? I mean, and of course, we have seen the USTR report, which was released, I think, the day before yesterday, where the US government has listed the grievances they have with certain countries. To be crystal clear, it would not be hard for us to come up with a similar report with the grievances we have with the US system and the non-tariff barriers they have. So that's why we negotiated a trade deal back in TTIP time. So I think, and that's maybe the first start for some negotiation, far away from a trade agreement, but I think we have to be crystal clear that we have stakes in this. There are US important stakes in the European market. We are an important contributor to millions of jobs in the US. And the US is gaining a lot from the single market access. I believe that we will not be in a good negotiation position if we don't lay out all the options we have, and there have been several instruments which we have put forward. It cannot be only reduced to trade in goods. We have to look at the whole economic relationship, and then we can have a serious discussion of how we want to come to an agreement.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. Dr. Nikolaus Kessels, from the perspective of the German Federation of Industries, BDI, I believe it's been pretty much as busy as at the Foreign Affairs in your division over the past days. Hildegard Müller, the head of the Federation of German Car Makers, has already commented this is not America first, it's America alone. Tough times. Over to you and with the first statement from your perspective.
Yeah. So what do we do, right? I mean, that's we've been here before several times, not just with the US. We've been here with Brexit before. But the quality has changed, right? I mean, the brazenness of it all is really surprising. The way that they come up with tariffs, I mean, they weren't calculated. I mean, it's not inconclusive in how they were calculated. They are arbitrary, and they are, I would even argue they aren't an instrument to come up with a measure against certain grievances. I think that the game is a little bigger here. And I will say two sentences about this after I'm done with the what do we do now part of my introduction. I think what we do now is we need to react, we need to deter first, and force to negotiate. And if you've heard this logic before from us, it's exactly what we said during Brexit, and it's exactly what we said after Russia invaded Ukraine. You cannot negotiate with a bully. You have to deter him, and you have to make him negotiate. Donald Trump is a bully, and what he wants is not manufacturing in the US. And what he wants is certainly not a fair shake or tilt the balance in his favor on trade issues. I mean, Claudia said it, Christoph said it, when you account for financial services, it's really the US who has the trade deficit with us. So if it's not, if we're bringing all rational knives to crazy gunfights, maybe the answer is something different. And the answer to me is that Donald Trump is hell-bound on destroying a world that is based in cooperation. People who cooperate are anathema to bullies, right? And the European Union is as a model sui generis that is nothing but cooperation between nation states, something that needs to go. And we as Europeans need to understand that for Donald Trump, that is something that needs to go first before he can switch his view to the Pacific and to his tests of hegemonic rivalry with China. His MO is always the same. It's a game of chicken, right? I mean, it's two cars driving at each other and hoping for the other side to blink first. And I think that we need to successfully push back by making it hurt. And this is going to be very difficult for us, obviously. But as with Russia, I don't think that we have much of a choice. And BDI, the Federation of German Industry, will issue or has issued 20 minutes ago a press statement to exactly that effect. Without deterrence and without making it hurt on the other side of the Atlantic, there will be no successful negotiation with Donald Trump. And so far, I guess the logic of it all is very simple. Someone who wants to destroy cooperation has to be forced to cooperate. That's a tall order. And then we'll have to see. It will be touch and go trade policy wise for the next 3 to 4 years. Maybe one last sentence to how we as a trading organization, and I know everybody says Germany is an export nation, but truly we are a trading nation. How we as a trading nation will deal with this, and how my members and my members' members, the companies, will see this. We all know that if Trump gets what he wants, there will be no German trading model any longer, because Trump believes truly in societies. The strong will do as they please, while the weak will suffer what they must. And the European Union, as a cooperating buildup of nations, I said this before, is something that has to go before he can do his big power politics with Beijing. So we know we have to suffer before we can negotiate with the United States.
One of the detrimental effects of Trump's trade policy is its volatility. In the beginning, Claudia Schmucker has outlined some of the policies announced that were enacted and not enacted and renegotiated and renegotiated. So Dr. Kessels, could you say, just as a brief follow-up, a word about how the uncertainty plays a role in this? And talking about uncertainty, there's even now new uncertainty about Elon Musk remaining in the Trump circle yesterday. So there's more going on in the Trump administration in terms of uncertainty and instability. So I wonder to what extent this factor of instability plays into it. And there's also a first question in the chat, which I'll pick up by Dennis McShane, arguing that it's better to not throw insults at Trump, but make arguments to the American voters. I think it was notable to see a group of car workers in the Rose Garden yesterday when the tariffs were announced. So if you could pick up this question as well, making arguments to American voters rather than taking up the battle with Trump on another level. Dr. Kessels first, and then I'll open up to others as well.
I don't think that calling Trump a bully is really throwing insults. I think insulting would be not stating facts. I think it's a fact, and that's undisputed. First, second, returning the hurt is making the argument to the American voter, because we have tried the more cautious approach during Trump 1. Why try this again when it has obviously failed? And second, and third, uncertainty. Uncertainty is an interesting category because some will argue that investment puts Trump into the right, that investments have skyrocketed in the United States. However, economically, that is not entirely correct now, is it? Because if you have investments for the US market sphere, and then you have investments that also go, let's say, to some of the ASEAN countries, so as to serve Southeast Asia and China, then you don't have investments that lower per unit costs, which scaling is obviously always intended to do, but you have investments in several places that actually, and ironically, while creating investments, increase per unit costs. Local for local makes everything more expensive for the producers, for customers. So if you measure the uncertainty or the success of Trump's trade policy by looking at investments can also steer you towards more uncertainty. Companies have to spend more to hold the level or produce and sell below par. That's a very difficult. It's a very difficult world, and it's. I mean, non-cooperation increases uncertainty. It's as simple as that.
Thanks a lot. There are already questions pouring in the chat. Can I also encourage everyone to come forward, ask questions in person, which is nice and interactive and also makes life easier for me. But I'll try and pick up what's in the chat. Felix Christian Haas is asking a question about pull factors for industry to relocate from Germany to the US. Giving the example of energy prices, would German cooperation, he asks, with the US on this new industrial policy, similar to the German move to China from the 1980s onwards, be any part of considerations? And I think, Mr. Seemann, there's at least one more question in the chat by Mark Losewitz, who's asking about instruments that the EU has to counter these tariffs, and if you could elaborate a little more on that. Let's leave it with these questions. There's more coming, and then I'll give Claudia a chance to come in as well after that. But Mr. Seemann first.
All right. Yes, I will start with the first one. I mean, just maybe from the start, I think we all agree, and Germany really first place, that the status quo is not an option. And for 3 years, we have operated under the reality that the status quo does not exist anymore. So the German model, if you want, has to undergo change, and the European Union and the new German government, we have to react to this. And in that sense, I mean, maybe coming then to the question on relocation or investing in the US. To be honest, I think that is nothing new. The US will stay a huge and important market, whatever the trade barriers are. And for us, the trading and economic relationship with the US will stay the most important outside of the European Union. So yes, we have seen during IRA, but also now with the Trump election, we have seen companies announcing and moving investment to the US, not only because of tariffs, because I think tariffs are not really the incentive to relocate or not. It's really the market size, it's energy prices, it's the investment environment overall, and the US will remain attractive as far as I as a bureaucrat can talk for business. So this will always be part of any solution, even though, of course, also the German government cannot order German investment going to the US. So, but this will be part of some agreement, and I think it is also, maybe to one of the earlier comments, I think it is also our job to bring these numbers and how intertwined we are economically to the US government, to underscore how this relationship matters actually to both sides, and that Europe is not has no part in, if I recall yesterday's words, raping the US economy, but that it is really a beneficial partnership which we have and which we want to maintain. On the second, and there I will be quick on the instruments. I mean, they are the WTO instruments, which are slower, but which we will pursue. There are other instruments the EU has added in the past. The enforcement regulation, which kicks in if the WTO dispute settlement doesn't work. It has been used before. There's the anti-coercion instrument, which is only an enabler. It does not really prescribe what you have to do. And of course, there are the other market instruments, competition policy, single market policies, which we have set up, which we have to look at, because clearly the answer is not by reacting only with counter tariffs with goods. That from my...
Thanks, Claudia. Before I hand over to you, there's also a question about potential concessions by the Europeans that Trump might be aiming for This was also a question by Mark Losowitz. So please feel free to pick up some of the questions and issues raised before, Claudia.
Yes, thank you so much. I have a couple of comments on what my colleagues here also said. I would first of all want to agree with Nick that he does not see the EU as an entity that he wants to support. So the EU is out to screw the United States. The EU, he has not met a single representative of the European Union. He has not met Ursula von der Leyen. He has not met Kallas or our trade commissioner. So there's no interest in having a relationship with the EU as a region. So what the EU did, because we are not interested in a trade war, we know that tariffs and retaliatory tariffs hurt our own industries. So we tried to negotiate. We had Commissioner Šefčovič going to Washington twice, even before April 2nd. And as far as I know, he's a very good working relationship with Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Minister. And they agreed that it's important to have these negotiations, but then the decision was made in the White House. And the EU has no connection to the White House. So what we see is a large group of people, they're all part of trade policy, Jamieson Greer, Lutnick, but in the end, it's Donald Trump and his way to deal with trade and trade policy and tariffs.
Yes.
And here the EU has so far no chance to really open up. I mean, we did go there. We offered LNG and more purchases like we did in Trump 1. We also indirectly offered to lower the car tariffs if that's a sector that he's really interested in. There was just no interest. The EU, as far as I know, calls it even stinky fish negotiation tactic, which means he throws a stinky fish on the table and says, so now what are you doing to take the fish? So we take the fish back. So no willingness to enter into negotiations in good faith where both sides would try to negotiate. And the second comment I want to make is on the pull factors for industry. I mean, yes, it's the market, it's energy, but it's also rule of law. And when you have a president who can change anything on a whim and where you have uncertainty, that's also not very good for investment. And my last point would be, yes, the US is our largest trading partner outside Europe. But if it continues, we also diversify from the United States. I mean, what we see right now is that our trading partners are lining up to negotiate free trade agreements. We have Mercosur, that was also in light of upcoming Trump. We have the large emerging market economies in Asia that are lining up. We had difficulties before. We now have agreements with Malaysia, with Thailand, with Indonesia, ongoing also with Australia. So trading partners are really lining up with the EU because they fear that the US will close its markets. So yes, the US is important and will stay important, but we will definitely diversify.
Dennis McShane, you've had your hand raised for a while. I read your comment, but perhaps this was a follow-up that you wanted to make.
Yes, thank you. Am I on audio, Jan?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, good. Ich weiß nicht, ob jemand aus Brexit England hat dem Recht, in diese Debatte teilzunehmen, but perhaps a little perspective from our country is of use. The Conservatives and the Brexit colleagues here are jubilating. We're only 10% tariffs. Now, let me tell you, that will last up to the moment Prince King Charles receives Donald Trump, and the moment Donald Trump goes home from Buckingham Palace, Britain will be hit hard. But we have to open connections, which is why I fully support Christopher Seemann's early remark about being polite. I mean, leave the insults against Trump, to my friends to the left, to some newspapers, to Gideon Rachman, whoever. Our job is to just keep dialoguing. When President de Gaulle was always attacking America on Vietnam and other issues, President Johnson, then the American president, was asked by his staff, do we say something against de Gaulle, Mr. President? No, we don't. America and France are eternal friends. He'll be gone soon. Just focus on what matters. We should adopt the same attitude. On the other hand,
your question is?
Well, the question is, can we launch a public information campaign in the United States? I mean, a massive one, pointing out the number of American workers who depend on Europe for jobs? Can we find people like Alexander Stubb, the former president of Finland, who just played a 7-hour round of golf with Trump? Is there anybody in Germany who plays golf? Does Mr. Merz play golf? Does Mr. Klingbeil, or I don't know, or Mr. Pistorius play golf? Find the golfers of Europe to go and play golf with Trump. The more time he spends playing golf, the less time he has to cause trouble. And finally, take the Draghi and Letter report seriously. We're not serious in Europe. We're just as protectionist in so many areas ourselves. Construct a stronger, open Europe, and then we'll be in a much better position to take on Trump. Thank you.
Thanks for those 2 points. And I'll invite, I think, Mr. Seemann to respond to this in a second. I'd also like to pick up a question or comment, rather, made in the chat by Tom O'Donnell, who's bit of a bigger picture comment, really, about a changing world that Trump sees himself in, a world that no longer sees Russia as an existential threat, but sees himself in a geoeconomic rivalry with everyone in the world. And I guess the question is here, is this the new world and we're not going back to the old? Is this something for here to stay? So Mr. Seemann first, but then I'll also invite the others to come in afterwards.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be quick. Yes, I think, sir, you underscored an incredibly important point. We have to focus on what we can do. And what we have to do is really to get serious about the single market, to really move this debate from talk to really action. And I would add not only the single market, Claudia has added the trade agreements in the Indo-Pacific, Latin America, but enlargement, Eastern and Southern neighborhood. These are economic drivers for the European Union, and they're constantly overlooked. The importance Morocco, Tunisia have for our industry is considerable if you look at the numbers. So I think we have to do our homework and we have to focus on what we can do, because some things are not in our hands, really. So yes, on the other hand, you also mentioned rightly, we have to get the word out. We have to underscore. We have to go out into the American public. We have to show that we matter. We have to show that it hurts when our relationship is under strain. We did this in the first Trump administration. I think Germany launched a great campaign. It was called, I think, Germany and the US, Wunderbar Together. I'm not sure where we are on launching a second campaign, but it is clear that we have to go out and talk to civil society, to the scientific community, to business, to the governors who exactly know what kind of role German business play in their constituencies. So yes, there are things we can do. Others, like Claudia said, they're decided in the White House, and we don't know how the decision-making processes go. And of course, yes, we're all starting golf courses now for those who haven't started it by now. Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about your golf skills, Dr. Kessels, but perhaps you would also like to come in on the question of this campaign and what Germany and Europe can offer to the United States and to the people of the United States and the businesses.
Don't make again. I mean, I don't know if any of you has ever been to the Hanover Trade Fair. It's very, engineered kind of gathering. It's not a soccer match, and normally tensions don't run as high as when two of the big games or big teams are played together. But why do I mention this? Because my president, Mr. Leibinger, was at the Hanover Trade Fair, and when he called the United States our adversary, there was a lot of clapping, a lot of screaming, and a lot of soccer match tension in the air. And why is that? Because I think, and we are at BDI, clear-eyed about what we can bring to the table. We are strong as a common market. We are strong as a German industry. But what we cannot do is give Trump something and hope that he lets up. That will not happen. So knowing who your adversaries, your opponents are, should be the driving force to and I couldn't agree more with Dennis McShane, strong at home so we can be successful abroad, which doesn't mean to give Trump anything that he wants, because that's a fool's errand. He will never give you what you want. He takes. That's the principle of it all. He takes more and more and more. He's insatiable. He will never give you anything unless you force him to. And this is something where I think the trade policy diversification strategy of the European Union can be of the biggest value, very huge, to quote an intellectual these days. We need to close the Pacific Rim, which means we have trade agreements with Korea and Japan, and we should be talking about maybe accumulation and a common chapter of origin so that we can really make this one trading area. We are making progress with Indonesia and the Philippines, and the ASEAN countries of interest, that's obviously excluding Myanmar, Burma, need to have a common chapter of origin and accumulation agreement so that we have an EU-ASEAN trade pact. Australia needs to work now. That couldn't be more clear. New Zealand we already have, so that is me, going south. On the other side, there's Chile, there's Mercosur, that needs to happen. Never mind France and what they want, because this is too important right now. And obviously, we just modernized EU Mexico, and EU Canada is very promising. We need to close the Pacific Rim. We need to advance on our negotiations with India, because India is just waking up to a situation where its zero trade policy is just no longer gaining any track. We need friends more than we need to befriend Trump. I hope that's clear. He will never give you what you want.
Claudia.
Yes, thank you. Just to support this, because Jan, you mentioned there's a question on geoeconomic rivalry and if the old world is dead, and if we need to accept that. I think if I'm correct, US, when you look at trade, is about 10% of global trade. So they have a large common market, but they are not that integrated in trade, which means it's still a loss if they decide to no longer cooperate. But the EU, in cooperation with all the countries that Nicholas just mentioned, with the CPTPP agreement, a huge agreement in the Indo-Pacific, will be able to uphold this cooperative system because we all benefited from it. It's not 100% the way we want it, but it's working for all these countries. And as I said before, he undermines the global trading system. He does it on purpose. I mean, he's still part of the WTO, but we do not know if he will leave the organization as well. He undermines most favored nation, non-discrimination, because he believes he can. But I do not believe that he has this power. So the former deputy director, the former American deputy director, Alan Wolf, suggested that we have a code of conduct of a large number of WTO members who agree to still adhere to WTO rules. And then we have the free trade agreement, which is also rules-based. So I believe that if the EU sticks to these rules in cooperation with the partners that Nicholas just mentioned, we can continue with this cooperative way. We just have, when he announces 10% global tariffs, this really unites countries. As I said before, they are looking forward to closer cooperation with the EU. So I do not believe that the system is over. And maybe one more thing on the outreach and stakeholders. I mean, this is what we said during TTC with the Biden administration. This was clearly designed to have stakeholder outreach. So if it doesn't work between the EU and the White House, we still have transatlantic businesses. We have the governors, we have the voters, we have the parliament. And I think this is where we need to approach and see whether we find common ground. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I want to give Mr. Seemann a chance to come in as well. There's a debate in the chat. Emma Brook and JD Binnenag came in talking about Trump's divide and conquer approach and Europe's potential to respond by finishing the single market and consolidating its capital markets. So that's one question. And there's also another question that just came in from Michael Sander on the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment and the status in the parliamentary process there. So, Mr. Seemann, any of these questions or others that are still left unanswered? Over to you.
Thank you. I will pick the question on the Kai on China, because I think it's symptomatic for maybe a looming debate we will have here, and there I would just add my 5 cents. The geoeconomic challenge we have with China's trade and industrial policy will stay, and how we have approached this as EU, using our instruments and protecting ourselves against unfair and market distorting measures, that will not go away and should not go away, because on the one side you could say US tariffs hurt our economies in the short term, but Chinese trade and industrial policy will make our industry go away in 5 years. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you get the picture. So I think that there's no balancing in how we approach this, and that's why we come back to the fundamentals. We have to work on our competitiveness, the single market, the trade agreements, which Dr. Kessels and Claudia Schmucker reiterated, and not reheat an agreement which was negotiated under different circumstances and which would not hold the test of economic benefit today.
Thanks a lot. There's a question for you, Claudia, in the chat. If you could explain the Mar-a-Lago Accord by Stephen Miran, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, as the theoretical blueprint for the Trump trade policies. Of course, also welcome to respond to what's been said before, Claudia.
Well, I'm not happy about that question, and I hope that Christoph and Nicholas can back me up. I just want to say one word on the divide and conquer. I mean, I agree with the Draghi report, with the common market. We've been saying that for a long, long time. And hopefully Trump, if there's one positive thing, is the free trade agreements that now everybody's interested in, maybe a sense of urgency that we finally need to do in Europe what we knew we need to do. So this is important. Another positive thing is that he had the tariffs addressed to the EU and not to Germany, because there was a strong fear that he would try to divide and conquer, even though we are a customs union, to pick out individual countries that were on his radar. And Germany would have been one of the first because of the car industry. So I think it's almost a good sign that he chose to use the EU and not try to play European countries against each other. I hope that the threat posed by US trade policy is so high that individual EU member states do not let themselves divide by their national interest. This is really my hope, because this is what China tries, and this is what Trump will try, to give something to the countries that support his trade policy and try to divide others, particularly Germany will be in the focus. I'm not very happy about the Mar-a-Lago plan because it's quite difficult, and it assumes that the Trump trade policy has an underlying coherent plan, what it wants to achieve with the tariffs. And this is something that I really doubt. What Stephen Miran, I mean, I don't even think it's really much in the discussion. I think this paper was from November and basically addresses macroeconomic imbalances. As we see, the US has a huge deficit, but they have a surplus in the capital account. So to address these imbalances, and these are things that have been on the agenda for quite some time. I mean, even the G20 took on these kind of topics, but he wants to do this by forcing countries to devalue their currencies, from going from short-term borrowing to long-term, through these kind of tariff threats. And I don't know what we would get in exchange, to be honest, maybe a security guarantee. I mean, as I said, we are not negotiating with a partner that's negotiating in good faith. The question is, why should country do that? It's always mentioned that there was a Plaza Accord in the 80s where Japan was willing to negotiate. I think the severe problem is that this plan first does not really address the problems that US has, coming back to the savings rate. And second, it would put the dollar as a safe haven, would end that. So I do not think that he realizes the repercussions. If you use currency as a weapon, then the dollar as a safe haven will be gone. But I haven't heard for some time that this is a really serious discussion anymore. And the second point is, I do not believe that there's an underlying plan, a long-term plan for the tariffs. I believe this is something that he throws the stinky fish. I hope Nicholas and Christoph can maybe add or correct me.
Thank you, Claudia. I will invite both Nicholas Kessels and Christoph Seemann to pick up the question of Stephen Miran in a second.
Yeah.
But since we are already 5 minutes from 5% away from the end of our time, I'd like to start rounding up things by picking up a question by Felix Christian Haas in the chat about a potential stable equilibrium in this trade confrontation. So in other words, perhaps you could all close in about 2 minutes each maximum, where this might end. So there are a couple of days for negotiation left until some of the tariffs take effect. Where do you see these things going in the short term and midterm? I don't think there's any point in speculating on long term. There's just too many factors to be considered. But also, please feel free to pick up anything else that's been left unanswered. And I suggest that we go in reverse order to the beginning. So starting with Nicholas Kessels, then Christoph Seemann, and then Claudia Schmucker. So we can finish on time at 5:30. Over to you, Mr. Kessels.
Well, equilibrium. I don't think that there is one. I think that we had a chance to do reforms at the WTO and other global cooperative organizations. The US isn't interested, so we are in a time of disarray, and we will remain in a time of disarray. And we'll see. Actually, as a European, I'm happy that the EU is now getting that kick in the butt that it desperately needs to get its act together, because we have been complacent. I saw that in the comment section, and I do agree. Draghi letter reports. I think it's all been said. What's lacking is the political will, and I hope that the motivation is now strong enough, not just for our trading partners and those reluctant to trade within the EU to get their act together, but also for us to really complete the single market. This core moral accord essentially boils down to people being dumb enough to buy US Treasury bonds with a runtime of 100 years with no interest for those who receive the issued bond, so as to curry favor with Mr. Trump. Well, if you are introducing a permanent solution to a temporary problem, then obviously you're falling for this kind of grifters thing. I hope that my government doesn't spend my taxpayer euros on this. I mean, stranger things have happened, and certainly there's not a con in the world that people aren't dumb enough to fall for, and Donald Trump is a con man. I think that's undisputed. But the Mar-a-Lago Accord isn't worth the paper it's printed on. It's not a strategy. It has nothing to do with trade or economics. Donald Trump dabbles in power, and let me close by this: if we don't push back and make friends, he'll win.
Thank you. Christoph Seemann.
Yes, I will be quick. The equilibrium would be what kind of agreement could we imagine? And I think a lot of these issues have been out there in DC. I think they're called term sheets, where they want to work with partners on how to settle for this. If you talk about incentives, yes, there would be, I think, an agreement on some of the sectoral or sectors which the US government has deemed to be strategic. On steel and aluminium, we were very far in negotiations with the US government to find the agreement. to also address overcapacities, global overcapacities. I think on cars, there has been ample discussion about not only the tariffs, but conformity assessments, standards, which you can address. Overall, I think, which was basically more under the head of the Trade and Technology Council, the whole area of economic security, technology, semiconductors. There's a lot of mutual benefit in there. On critical raw materials, I think there's on both sides enough room to work and work on things together. On energy, there has been also quite some talk, LNG, that there can be more on the European side. So overall, I think you don't lack opportunities, but I see lack perspective that is really what is up for grasp.
Thank you. Claudia, Schmucker, any final words?
Thank you. It's very difficult to say where it can end if there's no rationale behind things. If it's chaotic, if he likes tariffs, if he likes the tariffs in connection to security, to Greenland, to whatever. So we do not really know. I like the Canada example. I mean, the closest trading partner with hardly any illegal migration, with hardly any fentanyl trade, gets 25% of tariffs. So what should Canada do? I mean, they don't do anything what he criticizes. So it's erratic. It's angry. We are out to screw him. Some kind of emotional things. So I really cannot say where it's going, because it could be that Mr. Stubbs plays golf and suddenly he sees, oh, we are not that bad at all. So it's very hard. I know the EU is really trying to negotiate because we want an agreement. We do not want a trade war. But if it's unclear what he wants, then we don't know what to do. And if he's the person who decides, even though you have long talks with the commerce minister, what both sides might be interested in, but if he's the one who has the final shot, who's deciding, what do you really offer? So the question is, who can stop him? The Democrats are not there. I'm really surprised. I mean, we had the long speech by Mr. Cody, Senator Cody. But other than that, Bernie Sanders, maybe they're not there. It would be such an easy way to unify. Congress, we do not see any opposition. There had been, during Trump 1, some suggestions to take back trade policy to the Congress, where it originally comes from. But we don't see anything here. We expected business to say a lot more, U.S. business that's also interested in the transatlantic area. We don't see much. So in my view, the only thing that can change him would be the markets. I think I saw something in the 25% against Canada, when the markets became very volatile. If inflation is rising, that's hurting his voters. In my view, that's the only way for him to take these tariffs back, because if they have no foundation, it's very hard to negotiate.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Nikolaus Kessels at BDI and Christoph Seemann at the Federal Foreign Office for joining us today and for helping us to make sense of this tricky and tough subject. Thanks for joining us at the German Council on Foreign Relations. We'll be back next week with a special briefing on American policy on Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, with Emma Ashford from the Stimson Center and Kieran Skinner, who is involved in drawing up the infamous plan by the Heritage Foundation and former Director of Policy Planning at the State Department. So join us again next week. We'll send out invitations shortly. And for today, thanks a lot and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.